Hey, welcome back. In this video, I'll show you how I created the following lettering poster. The first thing you want to do is go to Photoshop. In this case, I use 18 by 24 inch canvas and 300 ppi. And I started with a sketch, but you don't have to. But if you are starting with a sketch, you can go ahead and place it into your canvas by going up to File, Place. And you want to go ahead and select Media Box. That way it falls within your canvas. And the next step, if you need to, is to go ahead and crop your image. And you can do that by using the rectangular marquee tool and drawing a rectangle or square around your composition and making a new layer. Click Command J, which is the keyboard shortcut. And now what I'm going to do is resize my layer so that it fits into my canvas a little bit better. What I'm going to do is adjust some of the parameters by going to the adjustments and adding a black and white adjustment layer. And I ended up going to maximum white, and I merged my layer with my adjustment layer, and I added a new levels adjustment layer. And as you can see, I am playing with the levels here, and my goal is to get that pencil to show up nice and dark. And lastly, I added a new curves adjustment layer. Again, I want to get rid of that paper looking like texture in the background. And once again, I merged my adjustment layer with my original layer just to keep the number of layers down. And I'm saving it into my Creative Cloud files because I am going to export this to my iPad and use Adobe Fresco to vectorize the lettering. So now, as you can see, I am in my Adobe Fresco app, and this is an exported time lapse of my screen. And I'm pretty much just tracing exactly as my sketch was, but using the vector shape. I then exported this into Adobe Illustrator, and I'm using the Shape Builder tool to fill out the letters here. And I'm simply just selecting all of my text, all of my vector shapes, and once again using the Shape Builder tool to join the stroke with the inside of the letter. And I'm zooming in here, that way I don't accidentally get the middle of the P and the A and the R and the D. Once I have done that, I'm not quite liking the way the word parade sticks out. So before I use the 3D and materials, I'm going to do a little bit of fixing here using the delete anchor point tool. So instead of going to Adobe Fresco and retracing it, I'm going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm going to use the smoothing tool and the simplifying tool to just make these letters mesh a little bit better. So all I'm doing here is, again, getting my anchor point tool, messing with the Bezier handles, making those letters mesh a little bit better. And I'll go ahead and fast forward this part. So this is what the final composition looks like. The word parade doesn't stick out as much, and I think that looks better than the previous version. And now what I'm going to do is just change the color, because I noticed that when you do the 3D and materials effect in Illustrator, you can always find a better result by using a different color. And later I'll change it back to black. But for now, I'll use a nice yellow, and I'm just kind of shifting and rotating the composition to get a better look. And I'll now go ahead and use the Inflate 3D and materials. And right off the bat, that looks really good. You can see the shade falling on the left side, the light hitting from the top right. And I'm just gonna make a few minor adjustments here. Turn on the ray tracing just to make it better quality. Make sure you always turn up that quality to high, as I'll be doing here. And then make sure you render. As you can see, after I've rendered, the letters look a lot better. They look a lot more realistic. The light looks better, and the way it diffuses on the letters, it looks a lot cleaner. And like I mentioned earlier, I'll now go ahead and select it and turn the color back to black. And that looks so much better in my opinion. And once it finishes rendering, we can take it to Photoshop. But before we finish rendering, I'm gonna mess with the settings just a little bit more. Just the lighting and the shadows and all that good stuff. So I'm just playing around with it. Again, your lettering might require different settings. So meanwhile, I went to the web and I searched up a psychedelic color palette because I think it's going to be fitting for this lettering. And once I was happy, I imported it to Photoshop and I imported my color palette. And now I'm just going to make swatches out of my color palette by using the eyedropper tool and the swatches panel. And I'm not really concerned about naming them, but if you can, you should. And I'll go ahead and fast forward this part. So finally, after all the prepping and vectorizing and fixing, we can start coloring our letters. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the brush tool and I'm going to use the soft edge brush tool. And I'm just going to paint with the different colors. So this is where the magic really starts. Go up to Effect, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And again, it might depend on your settings, but you can see the way it interacts with the letters. It looks really nice. You can also, what you can do is change the blending mode of this layer, which I'll do here in a little bit. And you can also change or lower the opacity of your brush to make it less harsh. And I do that in some other instances. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Again, make sure each letter has its own layer. Make sure you use the soft edge or round edge brush. You can lower the opacity and you can change the blending mode of the layers, and you can add an effect of the Gaussian blur to make it interact with each of the black letters below really nicely.